In October 1973, an esoteric war in the Middle East triggered the first and biggest oil crisis of the 70s. In the previous episode, we delved into the reasons for the war, the fighting countries, and how Cold War considerations made the world choose sides. This eventually led to an oil embargo by the Arab nations against the West in response to their support for Israel. And as we saw, this embargo caused a severe economic crisis in the West, marked by soaring unemployment rates, high inflation, and economic stagnation, or in one word, stagflation. In this part, we will delve deeper into the aftermath of this story. We'll explore how energy policies were transformed by the crisis, examine the geopolitical shifts that occurred due to the embargo, and uncover the lasting legacy of this magnificent event. Whether you've been with us since the beginning or just joined, get ready to uncover some hidden gems of economic history. While I recommend watching the first part to fully appreciate the context, this episode can also be enjoyed on its own. Economic Rhapsody. Make sure to subscribe, and let's get started. In late 1973 and in 1974, the world experienced a seismic shakeup. And no, I'm not talking about the Hungarian life-changing invention of the Rubik's Cube in 1974. It was the oil crisis that left everyone scrambling for solutions. As we've already elaborated on the crisis in the previous episode, let's delve into its aftermath, which surprisingly yielded some very interesting and even positive outcomes. Think about that. Western countries were living the best life, partying with cheap oil like there is no tomorrow. But suddenly, someone turned on the lights. Or maybe in this case, I better say turned the lights off. They realized they couldn't continue relying on oil as if it were an unlimited buffet. It was like waking up from a prolonged slumber and realizing, we need a backup plan, and we need it now. This is where the energy policy makeover came into full swing. Countries began rewriting the rulebook on energy, introducing significant changes. They recognized the necessity of diversifying their energy sources. Solar power, wind energy, hydroelectric, and even the once notorious nuclear power underwent a transformation. Suddenly, these alternative energy sources weren't just secondary options, they became the new future. Energy conservation became a norm. People started carpooling, and lights were switched off whenever a single ray of sunshine was available. It was as if the whole world had a collective eureka moment.
If we use less energy, we will save more money.
Wow, genius. This may seem trivial now, but back then, it was a revelation, akin to the moment when people realized that smoking wasn't that good for their health as some shady doctors used to claim in cigarette ads. As countries acknowledged their over-reliance on external energy sources, energy independence became a top priority in the West. Domestic energy production suddenly took center stage, and energy reserve sites emerged as vital strategic assets. Energy became the world's new gold, leading to the founding of the International Energy Agency. The IEA was a coalition of nations united to ensure energy stability. They assumed the role of energy guardians, ensuring that the lights stayed on and the world continued to turn. And by the way, the IEA is still active today and ironically working to resolve another war-triggered energy crisis. These days, the IEA helps its member countries reduce their reliance on Russian gas and oil in response to the sanctions that the West imposed on Russia following its aggression in Ukraine. The IEA is also working to promote energy efficiency, reduce carbon usage, and develop renewable energy technologies as part of its efforts to ensure a secure and sustainable energy future. The energy crisis triggered more than just a few policy adjustments. It set off a comprehensive revolution in how countries generated, consumed, and even perceived energy. Western nations shifted from an oil fixation to embracing energy diversity, conservation, and self-sufficiency, all catalyzed by that unexpected war in the Middle East. That war resulted in more than 20,000 deaths on all sides, but in a retrospective view, I'm thinking that maybe those poor people did not die for nothing. Their deaths may have triggered the green revolution that might save much more lives and our planet. However, I doubt it can be any sort of comfort to the orphans and widows they left behind. Following the oil crisis, the global geopolitical landscape underwent a profound transformation. Power dynamics shifted, prompting nations to reevaluate diplomatic ties and alliances, disrupting the previously stable equilibrium and ushering in a new era of international politics. The oil embargo wielded by OPEC, driven by both political motives and economic ambitions, catalyzed changes in diplomatic relations. Western countries found themselves in a precarious situation, grappling with their dependence on oil-producing Arab nations and the volatile influence of OPEC. This realization prompted Western leaders to reevaluate their approach to foreign policy and energy security. The most immediate shift was evident in how Western countries engaged with oil-rich Arab nations. The embargo underscored the vulnerability of relying on a handful of countries for energy resources. It became clear that diversifying energy sources and establishing diplomatic relations with a wider range of energy suppliers was essential to avoid future crises. The West sought to mend ties with oil-producing nations, assuring them of continued trade relationships while also working to decrease their dependency. Norway, for instance, not part of OPEC, utilized its oil wealth to forge strong diplomatic and economic relations with Western nations. The country's strategic management of oil revenues, including the foundation of the Government Pension Fund Global, showcased a successful model of economic diversification that ensured stability and reduced reliance on oil. Moreover, the crisis highlighted the need for economic diversification in oil-dependent countries. Nations that heavily relied on oil revenues suddenly faced the vulnerability of their economies, which could collapse with a drastic dip in oil prices. This awareness drove countries to diversify their economies, investing in sectors beyond oil production and exports. The strategy was to reduce economic vulnerability and create more resilient economies that could withstand shocks like those experienced during the crisis. Dubai, within the United Arab Emirates, stands out as an exemplar. Alarmed by the potential volatility of oil prices, Dubai embarked on a multifaceted economic diversification initiative. The emirate invested heavily in real estate, tourism, finance, and technology. These efforts propelled Dubai into a global business hub and luxury tourism destination, showcasing the success of its diversification strategy. The oil crisis also led to a renewed focus on diplomacy and conflict resolution in the Middle East. The West recognized that instability in the region could have far-reaching consequences, not only in terms of energy security but also in the broader context of global peace. As a result, diplomatic efforts were, and still are, intensified to mediate conflicts, encourage peaceful resolutions, and prevent future wars that could disrupt energy supplies. Have you ever thought about why a relatively minor and obscure conflict between Israel and the Palestinians occupies such a significant space in the global media? On the other hand, I bet you're not as familiar with the conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo, right? It's a bit strange considering the fact that casualties-wise, this conflict is exponentially larger, around 10,000% bigger. Rest assured it has nothing to the ridiculous use of the word democratic in Congo's official name. As mentioned already, the crisis pushed some nations to develop stronger partnerships with non-OPEC oil producers. Countries that had been on the fringes of the oil market suddenly gained more significance as potential alternative sources of energy. This diversification strategy aimed to reduce reliance on a single block and enhance energy security through a more distributed network of suppliers. For example, Japan's heavy dependence on Middle Eastern oil drove it to forge closer ties with various Gulf nations. This partnership secured oil supplies and fostered economic development in the region. Similarly, the United States strengthened its relationship with Saudi Arabia, one of its major oil suppliers, by providing security guarantees in exchange for continued oil exports. This strategic alliance helped ensure a stable flow of oil to the United States, mitigating potential supply disruptions. And if I may, I'd add that such alliances, which are based on energy interests, are extremely hypocritical. Do you remember Jamal Khashoggi, the Saudi journalist? Let's say that he was not a big fan of the regime and finished his life in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, Turkey in 2018. According to CIA assessments, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman himself was the one to order Khashoggi's assassination by Saudi agents. Probably to minimize criticism, I guess. However, it seems like it does not really bother President Biden, the knight of human rights and free speech, who still sells them weapons. And moreover, today on August 23rd, as I record the video you watch now, they are working together on some Middle East grand agreement that could make Saudi Arabia a nuclear country. Wow. And it's not that I'm taking any position here. I mean, all is good, we do need energy and we need it to be affordable. I'm just pointing out how hypocritical and interest-driven the world can be. And I'm curious to know what you think. Would you prefer to reduce Middle East oil purchases to advocate for human rights? Or do you believe that the U.S. approach, despite its inherent hypocrisy, is the most effective to ensure economic stability? Feel free to share your insights and join in a constructive discussion. And please guys, subscribe to the channel to support us now as we speak, and if you can also share with friends, I will be more than grateful. European countries also recognize the necessity of reshaping their relations with OPEC members. The crisis prompted them to enhance diplomatic engagement with oil-producing nations and seek more stable trade agreements to ensure reliable energy supplies. This shift fostered stronger European ties with OPEC countries, contributing to the intricate web of global energy diplomacy. The lasting impact of the oil crisis was a reshaping of global politics, economics, and energy policy. It was a wake-up call that transcended borders, prompting countries to collaborate on energy security, economic stability, and conflict resolution. It transformed how nations approached energy, security, and diplomacy, reshaping alliances and priorities. The crisis was more than just an economic shock. It was a geopolitical earthquake that set the course for a new era of international relations and energy policies. The oil crisis, which began as a consequence of the Yom Kippur, or the October War, eventually reached a turning point. It's fascinating how history often finds ways to untangle the complex threads it weaves. The end of the crisis, much like its beginning, was shaped by a combination of political, economic, and strategic factors. As the impact of the oil crisis deepened, the nations involved began to realize that a prolonged embargo wasn't sustainable for anyone. Some of the oil-producing nations, while enjoying elevated oil prices, also faced a backlash in terms of their reputation as reliable trading partners. Meanwhile, the Western countries that had been severely hit by the crisis sought ways to secure their energy needs through alternative means. One of the key steps that initiated the resolution process was diplomatic dialogue. Behind closed doors, talks were initiated between the affected parties, seeking a way out of the crisis. Saudi Arabia and Iran, being the leading OPEC members, played a crucial role in these discussions due to their significant influence on the oil market. The negotiations focused on finding common ground that would allow for a gradual easing of the embargo without causing further economic turmoil. These diplomatic negotiations culminated in a series of agreements that set the stage for the gradual lifting of the oil embargo. Western countries assured oil-producing nations of their commitment to reducing their dependence on oil imports from the Middle East. In exchange, OPEC members agreed to increase their oil exports, albeit at a controlled pace, to stabilize the global energy market and prevent an abrupt price shock. The embargo's end was not immediate. It unfolded over a few months, reflecting the intricate nature of international relations and economic interdependencies. Gradually, oil flows resumed, but the crisis left an indelible mark on global energy policies and international alliances. In the long term, the oil crisis of the 70s catalyzed a series of profound shifts in how countries approached energy security, diplomacy, and economic stability. One of the most enduring legacies of the crisis was the heightened emphasis on energy diversification. Countries recognized the risks associated with over-reliance on a single energy source, especially one with geopolitical vulnerabilities like oil. One of the short-term effects of the oil crisis, however, was its contribution to the economic crisis of the Western world in the 1970s. There were indeed other key factors that may have been more significant than the oil crisis in igniting and fueling that crisis, including several financial factors, the Vietnam War, and the Watergate scandal, an unbelievable plot that I'm planning to explore together with you soon. Yet, the contribution of the oil crisis to this economic crisis cannot be understated. The West faced years of inflation and high unemployment rates, as we discussed in the first part of the oil crisis videos. Oh, speaking about that crisis, I would like to grab this opportunity to recommend our video series about Margaret Thatcher, known as the Iron Lady, who carried out revolutionary economic reforms to help Britain emerge from the crisis. It is a story full of inspiration about a woman that made her way from pretty much nothing to becoming the first female leader of the United Kingdom. So, in conclusion, while the oil crisis of the 70s initially brought about severe economic challenges and disruptions, it also ushered in an era of transformative change. It propelled nations toward energy diversification, technological innovation, and diplomatic collaboration. Its reverberations are still felt today, shaping policies that aim to ensure a more sustainable and secure energy future for all. And that's it for today. I will be soon working on the second oil crisis, which was triggered by the Islamic Revolution of Iran in 1979, so make sure to subscribe to get notified once it's ready. And by the way, if you watch this video only, it's time to remind you to watch the first part of this 2-video series. I promise that both videos can be watched alone and regardless of the watching order. And to be frank, I personally much more enjoyed the first one. Thank you for watching, guys. If you liked it, tell your friends, and if not, tell me. I invite you to subscribe, share, like, and mostly comment with your thoughts, ideas, fact corrections, and economic events from history that you'd like me to explore together with you. Economic Rhapsody. See you soon.